Aisha was a young woman who lived in a small town where life moved slowly. The roads were dusty, the houses were close to each other, and people knew one another by name. She lived with her widowed mother and younger brother in a tiny home with peeling paint and creaking doors. Money was always short. Every morning, she woke up before sunrise, cooked breakfast for her family, and then went to work at a small shop where she sold clothes and fabrics. Her life was simple, but not easy. The shop owner paid her just enough to cover food and bills, and sometimes even that was not enough. Still, Aisha never complained. She had grown used to hardship, and she found little joys in the world around her. She liked watching the sun rise over the rooftops, listening to the sound of children playing in the street, and sharing laughter with her mother while preparing dinner. One afternoon, the town held a community fair in the open ground near the school. It was a yearly event where stalls were set up with food, music played on loudspeakers, and families came to enjoy. Aisha was asked to help her shop owner at his stall, so she dressed neatly in a faded but clean dress and tied her hair back. She smiled at every customer, trying to convince them to buy fabric. While she was folding clothes on the table, she suddenly heard a voice behind her. It was a calm but strong voice, and it sounded strangely familiar. She turned around and saw a tall man in a simple shirt and jeans, standing with a polite smile. For a moment, her heart skipped a beat. She recognized those eyes, the same warm eyes she had seen many years ago when she was a child. "Samir," she whispered softly, unsure if it was really him. The man's smile grew wider. "Aisha. Is that really you?" It was him. Samir, her childhood friend. Many years ago, they had been neighbors. They would run barefoot on the streets, play hide and seek near the mango trees, and share sweets after school. But his family had moved to the city when he was 12, and after that, they lost contact. Aisha never thought she would see him again. She felt both surprised and shy. Her simple dress and tired face made her feel small in front of him. But Samir looked at her with the same kindness he had shown as a boy. He laughed lightly and said, "I can't believe this. After so many years, I find you here, in the same town." They talked for a while, remembering their childhood days. Samir asked about her family, about her life, and about the town. Aisha, still surprised, told him about her work and how she stayed with her mother and brother. She didn't mention the struggles, but he could sense them in her words. He didn't ask too many questions, not wanting to make her uncomfortable. What Aisha did not know was that Samir had changed a lot since he left. After moving to the city, his father had started a small business that grew into something big. Samir studied hard, helped his father, and then built his own company. He was now a millionaire, though he looked simple and never showed his wealth in the way he dressed or spoke. When he returned to the town for a short visit, it was only to refresh his memories of childhood, not expecting to meet someone so important from his past. As they talked at the fair, people passed by, busy with their shopping and laughter. But Aisha and Samir were lost in their own little world, sharing stories of school, teachers, and silly games they once played. Aisha laughed more than she had in months, and it made her face glow. Samir watched her with quiet admiration, noticing how she had grown into a graceful yet humble woman. After some time, Samir said, "I'll walk you home after the fair. Just like old times." Aisha hesitated. She felt embarrassed about her small home, but she couldn't refuse. When the fair ended, he carried some of the leftover cloth bundles for her and walked by her side. They took the narrow street that led to her neighborhood, passing children playing with old tires and women chatting outside their houses. Aisha felt nervous, but Samir spoke casually, asking about the little things in town, making her feel at ease. When they reached her home, she stopped at the gate. The walls were cracked, and the garden was overgrown with weeds. She looked down, wishing he wouldn't judge her for her poor condition. But Samir only smiled warmly. This is where we played, right? I remember hiding behind that wall when we used to play catch. Aisha looked at him in surprise. He saw the house not as a poor place but as part of their childhood memories. That moment touched her heart. She invited him in, and her mother came out, shocked to see him after so many years. She welcomed him warmly, offering tea and biscuits. Samir sat with them, talking politely, asking about their health and lives. As he left that evening, he said gently, "It feels good to be back here. I hope we can meet again." Aisha nodded, her heart unsure of what she was feeling. For her, this was just an unexpected meeting with an old friend. She had no idea that behind his simple smile and plain clothes was a man of great success and wealth. To her, he was the Samir she had once known, the boy who used to chase kites with her and laugh at silly jokes. That night, Aisha lay awake on her bed, staring at the ceiling. She kept thinking about the way he smiled, the way he remembered small details from their childhood, and the way he looked at her without judgment. For the first time in a long while, she felt her heart beat faster with a strange excitement. She didn't understand it yet, but a new chapter of her life had just begun. For Samir, as he drove back to the guest house where he was staying, his mind was full of Aisha. He had seen many people in his life, business partners, rich families, city friends, but none of them gave him the comfort and warmth he felt around her. She was still the same girl who had once been his closest friend, but now she carried strength and maturity that made him respect her even more. He didn't want to reveal his success too quickly. He wanted her to see him for who he was, not for his wealth. As the stars filled the sky over the small town, two hearts, once connected in childhood, had found each other again without planning it. Neither of them knew where this path would lead, but the first step had already been taken. And that step was enough to change everything. In the days that followed the community fair, Aisha found herself thinking about Samir more often than she expected. She remembered his warm smile, the way he laughed at their old childhood memories, and how naturally he had fit back into her world. Life for her went on as usual, waking early, working at the shop, and helping her mother at home, but in between those busy hours, she would catch herself replaying their meeting in her mind. One evening, as she was returning from the shop with a small bag of groceries, she heard a familiar voice call her name from across the street. She turned and saw Samir standing near a tea stall, waving at her with a bright smile. She felt her heart skip, just like the day at the fair. He walked toward her casually, as if he had been waiting just to meet her. "On your way home?" he asked, carrying the grocery bag from her hands before she could protest. "Yes," she said softly, looking down shyly. "I just picked up some things for dinner." "Good," he replied warmly. "I was hoping I'd see you again. Can I walk with you?" She nodded, and they walked side by side down the street. Samir spoke easily, asking her about her work at the shop, about her brother's studies, and about the small things happening in the town. Aisha, though still shy, slowly began to open up. She told him about her long hours at the shop, how her mother sometimes worried about money, and how she often dreamed of a better life but never allowed herself to complain. Samir listened with deep interest. He admired the way she spoke honestly yet without bitterness. She was not someone who blamed the world for her struggles. She accepted them and continued forward with quiet strength. It touched him more than he could express. Over the next few weeks, Samir and Aisha met often. Sometimes he would visit the shop where she worked, pretending to be just another customer. He would ask her opinion on fabrics he didn't need, only to watch her smile as she explained patiently. Other times, they would meet in the evenings, walking together through the quiet streets of the town or sitting in the small park where children played. Samir loved to hear her talk about the past. Aisha reminded him of stories from school, the silly songs they used to sing, and the way they once shared secrets under the big banyan tree. Those memories made both of them laugh, and with each laugh, the distance of years between them seemed to disappear. Aisha, in her heart, began to feel something she had not felt in a long time. She felt comfortable around him, as if she could be herself without fear of judgment. She didn't know why his presence felt so calming, but she cherished every moment they spent together. Still, she never once thought about wealth or status. To her, he was the same boy she once knew, now grown into a man who still cared about her. Samir, however, carried a secret inside him. Every time he looked at her, he wished he could tell her about the life he lived outside the town, the tall buildings, the office meetings, the luxurious home, the successful company he managed. But something stopped him. He was afraid that if she knew, her behavior toward him might change. He wanted her to see only the person he truly was, not the millionaire the world knew. One day, as they sat on a bench in the park, Aisha spoke about her dreams. She said quietly, "Sometimes I wish I could study more. When I was young, I wanted to be a teacher, but after my father passed, I had to leave school and work. Maybe that was life's plan for me." Samir looked at her with admiration. "You gave up your own dreams for your family. That makes you stronger than anyone I know," he said sincerely. Aisha smiled softly, though her eyes showed a touch of sadness. "I don't know if it makes me strong. It just makes me someone who had no choice." Samir wanted to tell her then and there that he could help her achieve anything she wanted, that he had the means to make her dreams come true. But he stopped himself. He didn't want her to think his friendship or whatever was growing between them was about money. He simply reached for her hand for a brief moment, offering comfort without words. The days continued, and people in the town began to notice their closeness. Some whispered kindly, saying it was sweet that childhood friends had reunited. Others, however, gossiped in harsher tones, questioning why Aisha, a poor girl, spent so much time with a man they did not really know. Aisha heard the whispers but tried to ignore them. She knew the truth of her friendship with Samir, and she trusted him. Samir noticed her worry one evening as they walked. "You seem quiet today," he said gently. She sighed. "It's nothing. Just people talking." "Let them talk," he replied firmly. "You know who you are, and I know who you are. That's enough." His words gave her courage. For the first time, she realized how much she valued his presence in her life. She didn't just see him as an old friend anymore, he was someone who made her feel seen and valued in a world that often overlooked her. One evening, as the sun set and the sky turned golden, Samir brought her a small gift. It was a book, with worn pages but beautiful words inside. "I remembered you once loved reading," he said. "I found this in an old shop, and I thought of you." Aisha held the book with tears in her eyes. It was not an expensive gift, but it was full of meaning. No one had remembered her love for reading in years. She whispered, "Thank you, Samir. This means more to me than you know." That night, as she sat under the dim light of her room, reading the book, she realized her heart was no longer calm. It was restless, full of a quiet joy she could not explain. She was falling for him, not because of anything grand, but because of the small, thoughtful ways he showed he cared. Samir, too, felt the change within himself. Each day he spent with Aisha made him more certain that what he was feeling was love. It was not the sudden spark of attraction, but the steady, deep warmth of two souls reconnecting. He admired her humility, her strength, and her kindness. And though he still kept his wealth a secret, he knew that one day he would have to tell her. For now, however, he wanted to keep walking beside her in this simple town, enjoying the laughter, the memories, and the growing bond between them. He wanted her to love him for the person he was, not for the millionaire he had become. And as the cool night breeze swept through the town, both Aisha and Samir carried in their hearts a feeling they could not yet name, but which was slowly shaping their lives in ways neither of them could have imagined. Aisha's days began to feel brighter, though her life was still filled with the same routines. She worked at the shop, cleaned the house, and cooked for her family. Yet, there was a new sense of warmth in her heart. Samir's presence had changed something inside her. His visits, his words, and his simple kindness gave her a happiness she had not felt for years. She would often catch herself smiling while doing ordinary chores, and her mother noticed the change too. "Is something special happening?" her mother teased one evening as they were cutting vegetables together. Aisha blushed but shook her head quickly. "No, nothing. Just, life feels a little lighter these days." Her mother gave her a knowing look, but she didn't ask more. She could see her daughter's eyes had a glow, and that was enough for her heart. Samir continued to meet Aisha often. Sometimes, he brought her small gifts like fruits, flowers, or books. Other times, he would simply sit with her family and talk, asking her mother about old times and listening to her brother's stories about school. He blended into their home so naturally that even neighbors began to notice. But not everyone looked kindly upon it. In the narrow lanes of the town, gossip traveled quickly. Some people whispered that Aisha was foolish to spend time with a man she knew nothing about. Others suggested she was dreaming too high, that such friendships never lasted. Aisha heard these words indirectly, and though she tried to ignore them, they troubled her heart. One afternoon at the shop, a woman customer made a comment that stung. "So, Aisha, I hear you've caught the attention of someone new in town. Be careful. Men like that don't stay long." Aisha forced a smile and said nothing, but her hands trembled slightly as she folded the cloth. After the woman left, she sat quietly for a while, her mind filled with doubts. That evening, when Samir came to walk with her, she was unusually silent. He noticed it at once. "You're not yourself today," he said gently. She shook her head. "It's nothing important." "It is important if it troubles you," he replied. "Tell me." After a pause, she whispered, "People are talking. They say I should be careful. They say, you might leave any day." Samir stopped walking and looked at her. His eyes were calm but serious. "Aisha, do you think I'm here to play with your feelings?" She looked down at the ground, embarrassed. "No. I don't. But sometimes, it's hard to ignore what others say." He placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. "Let them talk. I'm here because I want to be. I'm here because of you. That is the only truth that matters." His words comforted her, but deep inside, Samir felt the weight of his secret. He knew he could not keep it hidden forever. Yet he still wasn't ready to reveal it. He wanted her to be completely sure of her feelings for him, feelings not touched by the shadow of his wealth. As the weeks passed, Aisha's emotions grew stronger. She found herself looking forward to his visits with an excitement that scared her. When she saw him walk into the shop, her heart would race. When he laughed at one of her simple jokes, she felt as though the world became lighter. At night, she lay awake thinking about him, asking herself what this new feeling was. One evening, she was sitting by the window, mending her brother's school uniform, when Samir knocked at the door. He looked different that day, a little tired, as though he had been carrying a heavy burden. He smiled when he saw her, but there was something deeper in his eyes. "Come for a walk," he said softly. They walked down the quiet road lined with old trees. The air was cool, and the sky was painted with shades of pink and orange. For a long time, neither spoke. Finally, Samir said, "Aisha, have you ever wondered why I spend so much time here with you?" She turned to him, her heart beating faster. "I don't know. Maybe because, we were friends before." He smiled faintly. "Yes, we were friends. But it's more than that now. I enjoy every moment with you. I look forward to seeing you. I feel, at peace here." Aisha's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to tell him that she felt the same, but her shyness held her back. She simply looked down, clutching the edge of her shawl. Samir watched her carefully. He wanted to confess his feelings, but he hesitated. Would it be fair to tell her he loved her without telling her the truth about who he really was? His heart was torn. The following days brought small challenges that tested their bond. A sudden storm one night damaged the roof of Aisha's house. Rainwater leaked inside, making it difficult for the family to sleep. The next morning, when Samir came to visit and saw the condition of the house, he immediately offered help. "Let me arrange repairs," he said firmly. "I know someone who can fix this quickly." Aisha resisted at first. "No, you've already done enough. We cannot take more from you." "It's not charity," he replied. "It's friendship. Please, let me do this." After some persuasion, she agreed. Within a day, workers arrived and repaired the roof. Her mother was relieved, and her brother was grateful. Aisha, however, felt a strange mix of gratitude and unease. She appreciated his help, but she also wondered why he always appeared at the right time with solutions. How could someone so simple manage everything so easily? That night, as she sat in her room, she whispered to herself, "Who are you really, Samir?" Meanwhile, Samir lay awake in his guest house, thinking of her. Every small act of kindness he did was from his heart, yet he feared it might raise questions. He wanted her to see him as the boy she once knew, not as the man society labeled as a millionaire. Despite these thoughts, their bond continued to grow. Samir began to feel restless whenever he was away from Aisha. He found excuses to visit the town more often, delaying his return to the city. Each time he saw her, each time he heard her laughter, his heart confirmed what he already knew: he was falling in love again with the same girl he had once cherished as a child. Aisha, too, could no longer deny her feelings. One afternoon, as she folded clothes at the shop, she caught herself humming softly. Her mind was full of thoughts of Samir, his smile, his words, his kindness. For the first time, she allowed herself to admit the truth: she was in love with him. But with that realization came fear. What if he left one day, just as people said? What if this was only temporary? She pushed those thoughts away, holding tightly to the happiness he gave her in the present. The story of Aisha and Samir was no longer just about two childhood friends meeting again. It was becoming something deeper, something that touched both their hearts in ways they had never imagined. Their lives, though different in many ways, were slowly weaving together like threads of the same fabric. And yet, both carried unspoken truths: Aisha about her quiet fears, and Samir about his hidden identity. Neither knew how long they could walk this path without facing those truths. But for now, in the soft glow of evening walks and shared laughter, they allowed themselves to live in the moment, unaware that their journey was only beginning and that the real test of their love was still to come. The bond between Aisha and Samir deepened with each passing day. What had begun as small meetings filled with memories had now become a routine neither of them wanted to break. Samir, though carrying the weight of his hidden identity, felt drawn closer to her with every conversation, every walk, and every smile she shared with him. Aisha, in her own quiet way, had allowed her heart to open again, though she still did not dare to name her feelings aloud. One afternoon, Aisha returned home from the shop, tired from a long day. As she stepped into her house, she found her mother smiling more brightly than usual. On the table lay a bag of groceries and fresh vegetables, things they usually struggled to buy at the same time. "Where did this come from?" Aisha asked in surprise. Her mother explained, "Samir came by. He said he was passing the market and thought of us. He left these things." Aisha stood silently for a moment. She felt both grateful and uneasy. Samir always seemed to know what they needed. She wondered how he managed to do all this so easily. Still, her heart softened at his thoughtfulness. That night, as she cooked a proper meal with the groceries, she realized how much lighter their home felt whenever he was around. Soon after, another moment tested their closeness. Aisha's younger brother, Arif, came home one day looking upset. His school had announced a small trip, but students had to contribute money. Arif quietly told his sister that he didn't want to go because he didn't want to burden the family. Aisha felt a sharp pain in her heart. She remembered her own lost dreams and couldn't bear to see her brother give up opportunities too. When Samir visited that evening, she mentioned it casually, not asking for help but simply sharing her worry. The very next day, Arif came running home with a wide smile. "APA. Someone paid for my trip at school. They said it was taken care of." Aisha turned to Samir with questioning eyes, and he only gave a small shrug. "Every child deserves to enjoy school days. Don't thank me, it was nothing." But to Aisha, it was not nothing. It was everything. She saw how he cared not just for her but for her family too. Her heart swelled with affection, though she still felt a small unease. How could a man so simple in appearance manage to do all this? She never voiced the question, afraid it might sound ungrateful. Their moments together grew more personal as well. Sometimes they sat in the park under the shade of an old tree, speaking softly about their lives. Samir would ask her about her favorite books, her childhood dreams, or the little things she enjoyed. She, in turn, asked him about his years in the city, and though he always kept his answers light, she noticed a certain heaviness in his eyes. One evening, while watching children fly kites in the open ground, Samir asked her, "If you could change one thing in your life, what would it be?" Aisha thought for a long moment before answering. "I would go back to school. I would study again. Not to become rich, but to feel like I achieved something for myself. Sometimes I feel like my life is only about survival." Samir's heart ached at her words. He wanted to tell her that he could make all her dreams come true. He could send her to school, give her everything she wanted, and more. But he held his tongue. He didn't want her to see him as a solution to her struggles. He wanted her to see him simply as Samir, the boy she had once known, the man who cared for her now. Days turned into weeks, and the bond between them began to feel unshakable. Aisha found herself waiting for his visits with an eagerness she tried to hide. She would brush her hair a little more carefully, choose her scarf more thoughtfully, and even smile more brightly when he appeared. Her mother noticed and would often smile silently to herself. But not everyone was happy. A group of women in the neighborhood began to whisper louder, their words reaching Aisha's ears. "She is dreaming too high," one said. "That man will leave her broken." Another added, "We don't even know who he really is. She is foolish to trust him." The comments hurt Aisha deeply. That night, she sat by her window, tears filling her eyes. She didn't want to believe their words, but the doubt in her heart grew. The next day, when she saw Samir, she was quiet again. He noticed instantly. "Something is troubling you," he said softly. She hesitated, then spoke honestly. "Samir, who are you, really? You help us so much. You never speak about your own life clearly. People talk, and sometimes I wonder if I really know you." Samir felt a stab of guilt. He had wanted to keep his identity hidden to protect the purity of their bond, but now it was beginning to create distance. He looked at her and said, "I am your friend, Aisha. That is the truth. I will tell you everything one day, but for now, trust me. Please." His words were sincere, and she felt them deeply. Though her doubts did not vanish completely, her heart chose to trust him. That trust grew stronger one rainy evening when Aisha fell ill with fever. Samir rushed to her house as soon as he heard. He brought medicine, stayed by her side, and even made soup with her mother. For hours, he sat by her bed, making sure she was comfortable. When she woke and saw him there, her eyes softened with gratitude. You didn't have to stay, she whispered weakly. I wanted to, he replied gently. I couldn't leave you like this. In that moment, Aisha realized she had fallen completely in love with him. It wasn't about his gifts, his help, or his words. It was about his presence, his care, and the way he made her feel safe. She finally gathered the courage to confess. A few days later, when she had recovered, they sat together in the park. Her hands trembled as she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Samir. I don't know if this is right, but I have to say it. I. I think I'm in love with you. Samir felt his heart leap. He had waited for this moment, but hearing it from her lips filled him with joy he could hardly contain. He wanted to tell her the same, to hold her close, but again, the truth of his identity held him back. He smiled tenderly and said, Aisha, your words mean more to me than you know. I feel the same. For the first time, their love was spoken aloud. It was pure, honest, and free of conditions. Aisha loved him without knowing of his wealth, and Samir loved her for her heart, not her situation. As they walked home together that evening, the world seemed brighter. They laughed, they shared dreams, and they held on to the quiet magic of the moment. Yet, deep inside, Samir knew the time was coming when he could no longer keep his secret. He would have to tell her who he truly was. And when that moment arrived, it would change both their lives forever. Samir woke up before sunrise with a clear thought in his heart. It was time to tell the truth. He stood by the window of the guest house and watched the sky turn pale gold. He had held his secret for too long, not to deceive Aisha, but to protect the purity of what they were building. Now that she had shared her feelings, he knew honesty was the only path forward. He wanted a future with her, and a future could not be built on hidden parts. He walked to Aisha's lane that morning with gentle steps. The street still felt sleepy. A fruit seller arranged baskets in neat rows, and a boy swept the ground in front of the tailor's shop. Aisha's home looked peaceful, with the small plant near the door catching the first light. Samir paused there, breathing slowly, then knocked. Aisha opened the door wearing a simple scarf and a calm smile. She felt happy to see him so early, yet she also felt a soft worry in her chest. His eyes looked steady in a way she had not seen before. Walk with me, he asked. They took the quiet path by the old school and then toward the banyan tree where they used to sit. The leaves whispered with the morning breeze, and the world around them felt kind and still. Samir stopped and faced her, his voice low and sincere. Aisha, I have something to tell you. I should have told you before. I did not because I wanted you to know me as I am. But today, I must be fully honest. Her heart thumped softly. She nodded, giving him her full attention. She could feel the seriousness in his words, but she did not pull away. She had chosen to trust him, and that trust stood with her now. He took a breath and told her the truth, simply and clearly. He spoke about his family's move to the city years ago, about the small shop his father started and how it grew into a company. He told her how he studied, worked long hours, made careful choices, and slowly built a life with comfort and responsibility. He did not use big words or dramatic lines. He only told her what was real, that he was financially well off, that many people called him successful, and that he had kept this hidden because he did not want it to stand between them. He ended with an apology. He said he should have told her earlier. He said he would accept her anger if she felt any. He said he would accept her silence too. Aisha stood quietly, taking in every word. For a few long moments, she did not speak. The sounds of the morning birds, distant bicycle bells, light footsteps moved through the air like a soft song. She looked at him, at the same face that had laughed with her, brought groceries, fixed the roof, and stayed by her side when she was unwell. She saw the boy from her childhood and the man she loved layered together, the same and yet fuller than before. Finally, she spoke. I am surprised, she said, her voice calm. This is a lot to hear. But when I think of you, I don't see money. I see the person who remembered my love for reading and brought me a book. I see the person who stood beside my bed when I had a fever. I see the friend who walks at my pace. I see the man who listened to my dreams without judgment. Her eyes softened. You should have told me, yes. But I understand why you waited. I'm glad you told me now. A small tear formed in her eye, not from pain, but from relief. The truth did not break what they had built, it made it stronger. Samir reached out, then stopped halfway, waiting for her to respond. She stepped forward and held his hand. It was a simple touch, full of quiet assurance. The banyan tree shaded them, like an old friend watching over a promise. They agreed to speak to her mother that evening. When they walked back to the house, Aisha felt a new peace. Her mother welcomed them inside, poured tea, and sat with careful curiosity. Samir spoke politely and honestly, sharing the same story he had shared with Aisha. He asked for permission to continue seeing her daughter with respect and clear intentions. He also said something that touched the older woman deeply. He promised that whatever came next, Aisha's comfort and dreams would stand first. Her mother's eyes warmed. She had seen many faces in life, faces that smiled without meaning it and faces that looked away when trouble came. This man had brought groceries without asking for thanks, had helped repair a roof without making them feel small, and had honored Aisha's dignity at every step. She placed her hand over Aisha's and nodded slowly. If you both choose kindness every day, she said, you can handle anything. The day moved forward with gentle tasks. Aisha went to the shop, and Samir handled calls for his work. Through it all, a soft joy floated between them, like the steady light of a lamp. That evening, he returned with something small wrapped in brown paper. He did not bring jewelry or grand gifts. He brought a notebook with smooth pages and a pen of good weight. This is for your dream, he said quietly. If you want to study again, I will support you. Not as a rescue, but as your partner. You can choose the course, the pace, the place. Or you can wait. I only want to walk beside you. Aisha ran her fingers over the cover. The gift was simple, but it carried a promise she had never imagined could be hers. She smiled, a full, bright smile that reached her eyes. She could see a path in front of her now, evening classes, quiet study sessions, and a future where she could stand in a classroom one day and help children learn. Word spread in the lane, as word always does. Some neighbors were curious, others doubtful, a few surprised. One of the women who had once warned Aisha at the shop stopped by and stood awkwardly at the door. She offered a cautious greeting. Aisha welcomed her kindly. There was no need to win or to prove anything. Grace was its own answer. The woman left with a small smile, carrying a different kind of story back to the lane. Samir began spending time with her family in small, respectful ways. He shared tea with her mother and asked for her recipes. He helped Arif with math homework and showed him how to plan goals on paper, step by step. He visited the school and made a quiet donation to support the library, asking that new books include grammar guides, story collections, and science basics. He set up a modest scholarship in the name of Aisha's late father for hard-working students who needed help with fees. The school principal shook his hand with gratitude. Aisha stood at a distance, her eyes full. It felt as if her father's memory was now a lamp, lighting a path for other children in the town. On a soft evening, when the sky held the color of ripe peaches, Samir asked Aisha to walk with him to the banyan tree again. They stood under its wide arms, listening to leaves murmur above them. He took out a folded page from the notebook he had given her. It held a short letter, written in neat lines. It said he loved the way she greeted each day with quiet courage. It said he admired how she cared for her mother and brother. It said he wanted to build a life where kindness was the first rule and truth was the second. It said he did not want to change who she was, only to help her become even more of herself. It ended with a simple question. He looked at her, and she looked at him, tears bright in her eyes. She did not need grand speeches. She nodded, then smiled through those soft tears. Her yes was not loud, but it was strong. They decided to take each step with thoughtfulness. They would plan a small ceremony with family and a few close friends. They would keep life simple and steady. Aisha would enroll in evening classes at the learning center in the town and prepare for a teacher's training program. Samir would split his time carefully between the city and the town, making room for a home that felt warm and modest, one that carried the sound of laughter and the smell of home-cooked meals. The days that followed felt new. The house wore fresh paint. The little plant near the door stood taller in a clean clay pot. Aisha bought a fabric she liked from the shop where she worked and sewed herself a dress, one stitch at a time, patient and proud. Her mother hummed while cooking, and Arif counted the weeks to his next school term with bright excitement. Not everything became perfect. There were still bills to pay, chores to do, and moments of tiredness at the end of long days. But there was no emptiness. There was a shared rhythm, two people choosing kindness each morning, telling the truth even when it felt hard, and making room for growth. When Aisha struggled with a chapter in her studies, Samir sat beside her with quiet support. When Samir faced a tough decision in his work, Aisha listened and reminded him why he valued fairness. They returned to the park sometimes and watched the children fly kites like they once did. Aisha would hold her notebook in her lap, writing small plans with the pen he had given her. Samir would point out a bright kite and say, "That one is yours," and she would laugh softly, not because she needed a big future to feel worthy, but because hope had finally become part of her daily life. On the morning of their small ceremony, the town felt gentle. A few flowers hung by the door. A simple meal waited inside. Friends brought warm wishes and sweet prayers. Aisha's mother placed her hands on their heads and blessed them with quiet words that came from a place beyond sound. The banyan tree stood in the distance, a witness to the full circle of a story that began with childhood friendship and grew into a life built on patience and care. As the sun slid lower and light turned soft, Samir and Aisha stood side by side at the doorway of the little home. The world outside went on as it always did, sellers calling in the street, children playing, neighbors chatting. Inside the house, something steady and beautiful had taken root. They did not rush. They did not pretend that love removed all challenges. They only promised each other to walk through those challenges with honesty, respect, and a steady hand. The girl who once thought her life was only about survival now held a pen and a plan. The boy who once chased kites beside her now chose to chase a kind of success that could be shared. He had loved her before she knew his wealth, and she had loved him before she knew his name in the city. That truth sat between them like a light that did not flicker. Under the same sky that watched over their childhood, they began the next chapter, not louder, not richer, but truer. And in that truth, they found a happiness that felt like home.